So the early reports coming out of training camp today is that the defense was absolutely getting after it, as well as that it was a really physical day. And today we're going to talk about some of what we're hearing coming out of training camp. One of the things that I'm personally hearing is that the Raiders cornerbacks looked really good today. First team unit, second team unit, the guys out there had a really good day, specifically Decamerion Richardson. And we're going to talk about that in this video today because Decamerion Richardson might actually end up being the Raiders starting cornerback, believe it or not, which is kind of crazy to think because Richardson was a guy that I think a lot of people, we weren't really sure what this guy was. And truth be told, some people even thought he could potentially be cut. And he's now taking snaps consistently with the first team unit. So we're going to talk about all of that in today's video. Let's just start right away with some of the interceptions, some of the guys that are starting to stand out a little bit. We're going to start first and foremost with the rookie cornerback who has now had basically back-to-back practices with interceptions during the team period of camp. So Mike Dixon says the Raiders cornerback Vance Greedy intercepted Aiden O'Connell today. Vance Greedy is hungry. He's constantly making plays at camp. Now, to me, this is a really good sign to kind of hear about a UDFA at a position where I feel like the Raiders need guys to kind of step up. And we've actually seen a couple of guys step up, right? I already mentioned Decamerion Richardson, Eric Stokes, Darian Porter, the rookie, have both kind of looked good as well for the Raiders. And then even now we're hearing Vance Greedy is kind of getting after it a little bit. Greedy had multiple interceptions in college. I think he had like 5 interceptions just this past season. So that's a guy that can find the football out of the air. That's a guy that knows how to make plays on the football. And I think with this scheme and system, this is a guy that could potentially develop for the Raiders. And I want to see what this guy can do against competition. When we get out into some of these preseason games, I want to see what this guy can do out there. Usually you can tell if a cornerback's a good football player with pretty much right away. Right, pretty much within the first couple of fully padded practices. At the same time as preseason kind of comes around, if a guy has like real upside or not. Amari Gaynor last year was a guy that flashed, and he ended up making the roster for the Raiders. And this season, at least so far, and again, we haven't had actual games yet, but at least in this portion of training camp, Vance Greedy has looked good. 2 interceptions over the past couple of days. And I believe he had an interception during the OTA period as well, which obviously was a long time ago, not padded. But this guy's been making plays for the Raiders, and I think that's a really good sign. And it's not just Vance Greedy. There's a couple other guys that have made plays. According to your boy Q, Lonnie Johnson got an interception off of Aiden O'Connell a few plays later. And I think he was talking about potentially after the last interception that Vance Greedy had. So Aiden O'Connell throws 2 interceptions at camp today. Keep in mind, the Raiders are going full speed at this point. Now, they're not, taking cheap shots. They're not hitting people unnecessarily. But, full speed, right? The pass rush is coming, right? Guys are going to try to get to Aiden O'Connell. He has, 2.5, 3 seconds, depending on the drop. He has to get the ball out, so there's a little bit more pressure as a quarterback. And the Raiders defense took advantage of that today. 3 total interceptions. Lonnie Johnson got his hands on 1. Vance Greedy got his hands on another. And then the final one was actually with the first team unit. Geno Smith threw an interception to linebacker Devin White. Devin White has apparently looked really good as well. So according to the guy that I speak to, he thinks Devin White's the Raiders' best linebacker. And again, we'll see when the actual games kind of come around if that kind of sticks. But according to the guy that I speak to, he thinks Devin White is the Raiders' best linebacker. And again, I think this is one of those things where we'll find out if that's actually true. But the guy's been making plays, and he also mentioned to me that the Raiders have been practicing with Devin White blitzing a ton. He said it's literally one of the things the Raiders have, that he's noticed that they're practicing. Devin White ends up blitzing. They simulate pressure so a defensive end drops off, and then a linebacker ends up coming. You're still rushing 4. But it's not 4 defensive linemen. It's 3 defensive linemen, and a linebacker comes, and then the other defensive lineman, the 4th guy, drops into coverage. The guy that I speak to told me that Devin White has been one of the guys that they've been blitzing a ton. And this isn't necessarily that during the team period he's blitzing. He's saying that they're practicing specific plays, and he's noticing Devin White coming on blitzes. And that makes sense. Devin White has a ton of sacks over the course of his career. The guy's actually really good when it comes to blitzing and finding the quarterback. So from that perspective, I'm excited to watch Devin White as that time kind of comes around. How does Patrick Graham, Pete Carroll, how do they utilize White? At the same time, how much base defense do the Raiders play? How much nickel do they play? How much big nickel do they play? Right? So the Raiders defense is going to be so unique this season, and I'm very excited to watch those guys. It's going to just look a lot different. It's not going to be the typical defense that you see in the NFL. Pete Carroll, Patrick Graham are definitely mixing it up with some of the guys that they've kind of already brought on. Love that Devin White got an interception as well. He doesn't have a lot of career interceptions, right? I think White has like 3 or 4 career interceptions. But he is smart, right? He can get to the quarterback. He can force fumbles, which is something he's done a ton. He has a couple interceptions, but he was able to get this one on Geno Smith. This was apparently right after Geno Smith had thrown a touchdown pass to Dante Thornton, which, in its own right is a whole different conversation, which we won't get into today. Love the fact that the Raiders on the defensive side are forcing turnovers. And this is something that, we've been hearing over the last couple of days. But note that today is a fully padded portion of practice. Yesterday, today, completely different than a week or 2 weeks ago. These are great things you want to hear. And I know some people are going to follow it up and say, well, is it good to hear that your quarterback, your starting quarterback, is throwing interceptions? And to me, interceptions in camp from a quarterback don't mean as much, right? In camp, you're not going to play conservative and say, I want to go 5-5. Right? In camp, if a guy doesn't get open, you take that 50-50 shot just to see if a guy can make a play, just to allow guys to practice and develop their skills. Completely different in practice than in a regular season game where you might throw the ball away. Right? Geno Smith's never throwing the ball away in practice. So I'm not concerned with the interceptions. I don't think it's a huge deal. You throw passes to guys, you take those shots. You want guys to develop so when week 1 comes around, which guys are guys that you can actually rely on. Devin White actually did a presser, and he said that he feels comfortable, he feels healthy, he feels thankful, and he feels hungry. Absolutely love hearing that from Devin White. I cannot wait until the regular season comes around. And then even preseason, I'm sure Devin White's going to play a ton in preseason. I think the Raiders definitely have, their work kind of cut out for them. They got to figure out who the 2 best linebackers are. Jamal Adams, Devin White, Jermaine Pratt, Landon Roberts. Tommy Eichenberg has taken snaps with the first team unit. Amari Gaynor, as a UDFA, made the roster last year, which tells us all we kind of need to know. We're going to find out a lot, man. There's like 6-7 linebackers for the Raiders. Which 2 are going to step up and have that opportunity? You got another update coming out here. Mike Dixon said Maxx Crosby sacked Geno Smith. And then Devin White sacked Geno as well. While I was tweeting, as I pointed out yesterday, Geno tends to hold on the ball too long sometimes. So if you guys remember, we talked about Mike Dixon's tweet yesterday where he kind of said the same thing. He said sometimes Geno Smith just holds on to the ball a little bit too long. With that, Maxx Crosby had 1 sack on Geno today, and then Devin White had another sack. So again, Devin White having a phenomenal day in practice today. He had an interception. He had a sack as well. And this is interesting because, I don't think you're taking Devin White and saying, hey, you're going to spy Geno Smith or get into some sort of coverage, and then if Geno rolls out of there, then go attack. I think this is a blitz situation, as I just talked about, right? Devin White is something that they've been practicing. You're going to blitz. We're going to simulate that pressure. But that also is an interesting point. Like, did Geno Smith, see a defensive end drops back, a guy's blitzing? Was he just too slow to process that? This is an interesting thing that Mike Dixon is pointing out, because I talked about this in yesterday's video, and I'll just say it again. Geno Smith, at one point in his career, he was a slow processor, and this is why he wasn't good up until 4 or 5 years ago. So, I do think that's one of the things with Geno Smith is he's going to have to really be able to get the ball out quickly. He has to be able to read coverages and just trust the arm that he has, or just trust the guys that he has on that offense, and he has to just kind of get the ball out. We'll see what ends up happening. We had another update that came out today. Now, this one kind of confirms something we've talked about now for a couple of days. So we talked about Jordan Meredith and Jackson Powers-Johnson swapping, right? We talked about this yesterday. First day of pads, Jackson Powers-Johnson took the first team snaps. And today they swapped once again, and Jordan Meredith got the first team snaps. And this is really, really, really interesting because Pete Carroll was asked about this as well. And Pete Carroll basically said when he was asked about why these two guys were rotating, he said both of those guys are battling, which kind of tells us that this is not one of those situations where Jordan Meredith just needs to get comfortable with the first team unit. Jackson Powers-Johnson has to get comfortable with Aiden O'Connell. It's not one of those situations. This is a legit battle that the Las Vegas Raiders have kind of opened up. And I'm going to be the first to tell you guys, man, this is a really, really, really good sign, right? Although you want Jackson Powers-Johnson to start, the idea that Jordan Meredith might be good enough that you can put him in at the center position and he could potentially win that job over Jackson Powers-Johnson tells you have a good offensive lineman that might be your backup center. That might be a guy that can swing into the guard positions if that's where you need him. This is actually a really, really, really good sign. In fact, another interesting thing, and I don't know if Adam Butler slipped up when he said this, but Adam Butler said he's a real big fan of Jackson Powers-Johnson. This was in his presser. And he said he sees Jackson Powers-Johnson as an all-pro guard at some point. That is interesting as hell. Now, some people are starting to speculate a little bit. Is Adam Butler telling us that the Raiders plan to swap Jackson Powers-Johnson to the guard position? That's why he might be a quote-unquote all-pro guard. That's a really, really, really unique situation that's potentially arising at this point. The fact that Jordan Meredith took snaps with the ones once again today. The fact that Pete Carroll is now telling us that, hey, this is basically an open battle. And then Adam Butler, a guy who's literally lining up on the other side of the offensive lineman, right? Jackson Powers-Johnson and Jordan Meredith. The fact that the guy lining up on the other side is telling us Jackson Powers-Johnson could be an all-pro guard at some point. Does that mean Jackson Powers-Johnson will be moved over to that guard position? To me, again, this is a very, very, very interesting storyline that's kind of going on. Now, I'll just give you guys my opinion. Some of you guys probably already know what I'm about to say. I think it'd be a huge mistake not to play Jackson Powers-Johnson at the center position. And I say that, not that because I think Jordan Meredith's a bad football player. In fact, I'd even consider putting Jordan Meredith in at left guard or right guard, depending on whatever position he feels more comfortable with. I think the thing with being a center and a guard is that the center has to communicate with one another, and the center position is also a lot harder. So if your best offensive lineman is your center, that means that, guards are a lot easier to find relative to your center. That means that if you have the best center in the NFL, you can easily replace the guard position. You just got to put the investments in. And the Raiders already drafted Caleb Rogers, so that's already one guard that's going to be the long-term guard for the Raiders. At least that's the idea behind drafting him. I find it crazy that Jackson Powers-Johnson may not be the starting center for the Raiders. Now, if this is an open battle and you're picking the best player, I would think that's Jackson Powers-Johnson. I could also see the Raiders feeling like, hey, Jordan Meredith is a better center than like Dylan Parham or Alex Kappa are at guard. So we'd rather have Jordan Meredith start at center, and then we'll put Jackson Powers-Johnson at guard. I can understand that idea definitely as well. But again, I think for the Raiders, it's a huge mistake not putting your best offensive lineman essentially at center, right? Your best interior offensive lineman. I think it's a mistake not putting him at center. Again, I don't say this lightly. I think Jackson Powers-Johnson is going to become one of the best interior offensive linemen in the NFL. His tape backs that up in his rookie season. Sure, you can put him at guard. He'll be one of the better guards. You can put him at center. He'll be one of the best centers. I just think for the Raiders, you can lock up your center position for the next 10 years. Given guards are a lot easier to find. A lot of tackles can play guard as well. So again, it's just super, super easy to find good guards. I think it'd be smarter to put Jackson Powers-Johnson in at center. But we'll see what ends up happening, right? So this is something we'll kind of keep an eye on as we go forward. And I also do find it interesting that this is the only battle on the offensive line that the Raiders have kind of decided is going to be the battle, right? You would think that, hey, maybe there's a battle at right tackle. Maybe there's a battle at right guard or left guard, or, maybe there's a battle with like some of these other players. Why at center, right? It's just crazy to me to kind of think that. And again, I understand Jordan Meredith's a legit offensive lineman, right? And I understand he's not the strongest, so you probably don't want him at guard. You probably have him at center, where a lot of his blocks are going to be double team blocks. But, never overlook the fact that, when you play Dexter Lawrence or when you play Jalen Carter, those teams will come out with 5-man defensive line fronts anyways. And they'll put Dexter Lawrence or Jalen Carter on that center, right? So if your center, you're putting a guy there just because he might be better than at the guard position. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. Center's the easiest way to blow up any play, right? You blow up the center, you blow up pretty much any play, right? We'll see what ends up happening. It is an interesting storyline that we'll kind of keep an eye on. Now, in Adam Butler's presser, he also talked about another player. He talked a little bit about Jonah Laulu. He said, Adam Butler, that he sees some of himself in Jonah Laulu. He noted the success he had as a pass rusher and says Jonah is really putting in the work to become a better run defender this season. 2 days ago, I actually went back and watched Jonah Laulu's tape a little bit. And I'm going to be honest, you guys, I was not impressed at all, right? He only played like 250 snaps, and I watched a big part of those. He did not impress me at all. I think those were pass rushing specifically. He did not impress me at all, man. I'm not going to lie to you. He had like 11 quarterback pressures. I'd say like 5 of those 11 quarterback pressures were plays like, maybe like he fell by a quarterback, not necessarily he pressured the quarterback. There were some plays where like Adam Butler and him ran defensive line games, and Butler essentially got him free. There was a couple other plays where he had like cleanup sacks or cleanup quarterback hits, those type of things. Jonah Laulu did not impress me at all. I'm not saying that just to say it, Byron Young, great example, was not impressed at all. He ended up busting out for the Raiders. Thayer Munford, I was never impressed with him. He's not a starting caliber franchise tackle either. And I'm not saying Jonah Laulu can't develop from last year to this year, because he definitely can. But even as a run defender, multiple double team blocks where he just got blown off the line of scrimmage. There were multiple pass rushing situations where like he just tries to bull rush and then, there's no, double hand swipe. There's no spin move. There's no hezzy in the game, right? Like there's just not a whole lot to his tape that I personally saw. Now again, maybe he developed from last year to this year. Maybe he's taken a whole nother step in his tape. We'll find that out. But again, I'm just being 100% honest. I didn't see a whole lot. Regardless, Adam Butler does think he sees a little bit of himself in Jonah Laulu. And that's a good sign, right? Because Adam Butler's a good football player. And of course, with Adam Butler, it took him some time, right? His first 5-6 years, he was good at times, but he wasn't consistent. And he struggled as a run defender. And Jonah Laulu definitely struggled as a run defender as well. In fact, I'd say he's a better pass rusher than a run defender. And he's not even that good as a pass rusher, right? Or at least he wasn't last season. But it is interesting that Adam Butler feels that he had success as a pass rusher, and Jonah's putting in the work to become a better run defender this season. That's going to be something to kind of keep an eye on as we get into it. Jonah Laulu also gave us a little bit of insight into his thought process. He said one thing that's changed a little bit is my confidence in myself. He clearly feels much more comfortable entering year 2, and he's in line for a big role on the defensive line. So do keep in mind, with Christian Wilkins being released, Jonah Laulu is a guy that has taken a lot of the first team snaps. He's taken first team snaps. Zachary Carter has taken first team snaps. Adam Butler, Tyree Wilson has taken some first team snaps at defensive tackle. And Lekai Fodu is the other defensive lineman that's taken first team snaps. Although Fodu, from what I've heard, is playing mostly as a nose. So he's not taking like 3 technique snaps. So anytime they get into nickel defense, Fodu isn't necessarily taking those snaps. But Laulu is definitely taking some of those snaps. So I want to see what this guy can kind of bring. And again, we'll find that out in preseason. If this guy plays 15 snaps, we can watch those 15 snaps. And let's say 8 of them are pass rushing snaps. You can see movement, right? Like movement, even if you get no quarterback hits, you get no sacks, you get no pressure on the quarterback. If you can move well, chances are you'll be a successful defensive lineman over the course of your career. Adam Butler moved really, really well when he got to the Raiders, and I loved his tape. And he just got super consistent, and now he's one of the better, in my opinion, he's one of the better D tackles, specifically in pass rushing in the NFL. And with Jonah Laulu, again, we'll be able to see pretty quickly the movement on tape. And I am excited to watch his development a little bit, right? As I am with a lot of the young guys. We got 2 updates left that I just want to kind of get into. Decamerion Richardson, I mentioned him earlier in the video, but really didn't talk about him too much. Richardson, apparently he's stacked 2 good days of practice together, and he's getting work opposite of Stokes with the ones to start practice. Again, gonna be a lot of guys cycling in opposite of Stokes, but feels like Decam and Darren Porter are leading that battle. This is exactly what I've been hearing as well. So right now, it does seem like Decamerion Richardson, Darren Porter, and Eric Stokes are going to be the three cornerbacks that are going to be battling it out to start. From what I've heard, Jacorian Bennett, he might not even end up making this roster. I know that's kind of crazy to say, and I think he'll still make it, right? Worst case scenario, he'll be a practice squad guy. But from what I'm hearing, Jacorian Bennett has been taking snaps with the third team unit, right? That's like rookies in UDFA and guys at the very, very bottom of the depth chart. For a guy that started 2 years for the Raiders, played in half the games in each of those 2 years, it's kind of crazy how we've gotten to this point where Jacorian Bennett is not even considered a guy that you could potentially put in there and have potentially start. From what I'm hearing, one of the things Pete Carroll's doing is he is bringing a bunch of different cornerbacks in, right? JT Woods, another guy that has had some first team snaps. From what I'm hearing, the Raiders are basically throwing every single cornerback they have that they think could potentially start. They're putting them in with the first team unit. And they're seeing which guys can kind of stick, which guys can make some plays. And if you can make plays, you're basically going to keep that promotion. You'll have that opportunity with the ones. So today, for example, JT Woods was working with the second team unit. Decamerion Richardson and Darren Porter also took snaps with the first team unit, but those two guys also took snaps with the first team unit. And Eric Stokes has only taken snaps, at least today and yesterday, with the first team unit. So what that's telling me is these three guys in Decamerion Richardson, Darren Porter, Eric Stokes, from what I'm hearing, those three guys will most likely be fighting for that starter role. JT Woods could also be a wild card. He might end up getting to that point. But Jacorian Bennett really did not step up to the challenge from what I've heard. And I don't know if he's like the third string unit. I don't know if that's what I would say with it, but he hasn't impressed from what I'm hearing. And it doesn't seem like the Raiders are overly high on Jacorian Bennett, which again, to me is kind of crazy because I would have said before this season that Jacorian Bennett will be one of your starting corners. He's the corner with the most upside and most potential. And the Raiders might not feel like that, which is absolutely wild to me. But with that being stated, Decamerion Richardson, on the other hand, has absolutely flashed. And I absolutely love hearing this. Some guys in certain schemes may not look good. Last year, Patrick Graham ran a much, much different scheme than what Pete Carroll's going to run this season. Right? Just little things like, hey, if we're running cover 6, this corner has to be on the line of scrimmage. This corner has to be 4 yards off the line of scrimmage. Little things like that to the Pete Carroll scheme where, hey, we're going to run cover 3 and both corners have to be 6 yards off the line of scrimmage. Little rules like that with the different coverages. Decamerion Richardson has flipped, right? He didn't look all that good last year, and truth be told, I did not think he looked good at all last year, right? He looked awful to me. And now he comes into the Pete Carroll scheme, and the second he has that opportunity, he's looking good as hell, right? And I think for the Raiders, that's just kind of the difference when you have one scheme to another. Right? Jacorian Bennett kind of falls off, but Decamerion Richardson looks really, really, really good. And he's now stacked 2 good practices back to back. He's getting first team work with Eric Stokes, of course. Darren Porter's getting some of those snaps as well. The Raiders are in a really, really good spot with that secondary. John Spytek said this to us literally last week. I think it was like Monday of last week. He told us that he feels that the cornerback unit is so much better than what people kind of think. Pete Carroll said this might be the best cornerback unit he's ever had, or best secondary he's ever had. And he told us that, I think, last week as well. And again, it just kind of goes back to that. Maybe the cornerback room this year will actually be a strength for the Raiders. I'm excited to see that unit as well. Final update that's going to come out here. Jamal Adams apparently made a strong tackle for loss. He shot a gap with precision, speed on a blitz. He's looking sharp at linebacker. Now, from what I've heard, the tackle for loss that he made was on Ashton Jeanty. So Jeanty had a play in which he got the ball, obviously, and Jamal Adams shot the gap, and he blew the play up, essentially. And apparently it was a blitz as well. And that part of it doesn't surprise me. We've already talked about it with Devin White. Devin White's been practicing blitzing. Jamal Adams has had a lot of career sacks as well. This guy blitzes, as a safety, he would come off the edge. As a linebacker, the Raiders are going to blitz this guy as well a ton. The Raiders this year, if it's 3rd and 12, you can expect Jamal Adams, Devin White coming on blitzes, trying to get after the quarterback. And, Mike Dixon's saying that Jamal Adams is looking sharp at linebacker. I'm really excited to watch Jamal Adams and see at what point in his career is he at right now? Right? Is Jamal Adams a guy that's like, you know, he's in the final year or two of his NFL career, he's just a step too slow? Or is he a guy that was just hurt and now he's fully recovered, he's hungry, he's ready to get out there, and he's going to show us some of what he showed us in the past? You know, I always kind of go back to Charles Woodson. You know, in his final year in his NFL career, he was with the Raiders, and we saw what Charles Woodson was still able to do. Right? He had 2 interceptions on Peyton Manning while Peyton Manning was with the Broncos. He had a couple other interceptions that season as well. He made play after play after play, but you could tell he wasn't the same type of player. Like, he wasn't coming downhill and being physical and hitting people, right? He was definitely a little bit more careful because he was up there in age, right? But you could still tell this guy was, you know, one of the smartest players out there on the football field. He was once one of the GOATs, right? Especially early on in his career, how great he was. I want to see if Jamal Adams could be that type of person, right? We'll see if that's going to end up happening. Something tells me he's going to end up being really, really solid for the Raiders. But we'll see what ends up happening, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Camp, man, it's here. The game's right around the corner at this point. We actually have real football, I think, in 2 days. So that's absolutely crazy. The season's back. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.